Hey guys, it's King Arthur here again, and today's class is going to be about mixing down your tracks. It's one thing to create a beautiful idea, it's another thing to have it sound good and sound professional. And so this is a track that I'm working on with a guy named Sam Felt. He's doing huge things right now, and this is a collaboration we're working on. When I talk about mixing, what I'm saying is how all of the elements in your song are balanced against each other, with loudness, brightness, how big, how soft, how fat, how wide, all those things come together to make a really good sounding mix down. One thing that I've been forced to do is I'm doing a lot of traveling and playing shows around the world right now that I have had to learn how to produce, mix, and master everything on the road. My last single that came out a couple weeks ago, I mixed and mastered the whole thing on iPod headphones because it's all about referencing. And I'm going to hopefully teach you guys some skills where no matter what setup you guys have, you're going to learn how to reference your material against the songs that you love and are kind of the industry standard so that we can bring the best out of you as an artist. Whether you have iPod headphones, whether you have Beats headphones, whether you have Bose headphones, or you have wonderful monitors in a beautiful studio, all of those things are great options. But what is important is whatever environment you are going to mix your track in, you need to make sure you're listening to lots and lots of music from other people in that environment. So you can start to train your ear and have an understanding of how your room sounds or your headphones sound so that when you go to mix down your track, you know what the standard is that you're trying to achieve. It's really important when you sit down to mix a track, you need to have a goal in mind of, I want this to be in the same ballpark as this track that I really love. Find a DJ or producer that you love and pick a track of theirs that you love that you want your song to sound like, not melodically, not idea-wise, but professionally. Does it sound really big and fat in the low end? Is it a bit punchier? Is it really wide? Is it really warm sounding? These are all things that you're gonna want to start taking notice of so that you have a goal of what you're trying to shoot for. So this section of the class we're going to call preparation because it's all about preparing everything for your mix. You need to know what you want it to sound like, where you're trying to go, and part of that preparation is picking your reference song or songs. So I've picked a couple tracks that I know I want my song to stand up next to. I don't want it to sound exactly like it, but it needs to be in the same ballpark as those tracks. So I'm going to play you a rough clip of this really raw version of my song, and then I'm going to show you some of the reference tracks so you guys can get an idea of what I'm talking about. That's a really raw snippet of the song. And I'm actually going to really have to put all this stuff to the test. I've never been in the studio before. I've never listened to music on these monitors before. So I'm not just teaching you this class, just throwing this information out there. I'm actually going to have to practice this stuff today while I mix this track down. So I need to check the kick and the bass line levels. I think the mid bass might be too loud. I'm not sure the piano is sitting right in the mix, and the lead isn't cutting through the mix like I want it to. And I definitely know the vocals are still need to be mixed in properly, and I need to do some work on those. But there are things that are sticking out to me. I think that it sounds a bit flat, it's not as punchy as it needs to be. It sounds a bit muddy as far as the way that the elements are playing off of each other. So I know that each element needs to have its own space in the mix while coming together to form something beautiful. So I listen to these songs and I think, the lead needs to be really looked at. The bass line and the kick and the vocals are the big things that stick out to me. Now I'm going to look at some of the other tracks that I want to reference that can help guide me in getting my track to sound where it needs to be. So the first one is actually my last single that just came out, and I'm only talking about this one because Sam, who asked me to do this collaboration, he loves this song. And he said he loves the way the track sounded and everything. And the track is doing really well, so I know that that is a benchmark that I want to achieve again.
Don't you bring me down, gonna pick me up. This isn't just a game, we're talking about love. Talking about love. Don't you bring me down, gonna pick me up. This isn't just a game, we're talking about love. Talking about love.
So the big things that stick out to me from this mix, because this is a brand new room and I've never heard music on these monitors before, is the way that the kick and the bass line sit on these monitors is very different than what I'm used to. And so also the way that the highs come through. So those are things that I'm going to really have to take into consideration. But it's interesting to hear it on these monitors because it's very different than what I'm used to hearing the song. So it's really important to take note of just how the lead seems to be really on top of everything and the kick and the bass line seem to be sunk back in a bit. But this is where it's really important to get to know the system that you're listening to your music on, whether it's headphones or monitors. These are characteristics you really need to know. So the second song, I'm going to listen to the Sigala song and we'll check this one out right now. So this one, since this has been a radio hit worldwide, it's really important to listen to the way the vocals sit. Because radio songs, the vocal is always the most important thing. So I was listening a lot to how the vocal is sitting in the mix down with everything. And I also noticed the kick and the bass line thing again, that the way these monitors are, the kick and the bass line seem a bit more sunk back. So I just need to keep that in my mind when I'm going to get into my other track. The last track, this one I know goes off in the clubs. It's one of my favorite songs to play out live. It's got great chord stabs and everything, so I'm going to play this and listen to how it sounds on these monitors as well.
I'm starting to feel
So what I noticed in this track is the piano is way more prominent than the other tracks, and the percussion sits back a bit more. It's not as in your face, but the chord stab piano stuff is really at the forefront. After listening to those and starting to get a better idea of what the monitors in this studio sound like, I'm going to come back into my track and I'm going to constantly be bouncing back and forth between my song and these reference songs, and I'll reference different songs for different elements of my song. So when I listen to the vocal, I'm going to be really conscious of how the vocal sits in the radio song. When the kick and the bass line, I'm going to be really conscious of how the Eagle Eyes song sounds, because that one works really well in the clubs. Maybe take notes, write down some different things that you want your track to sound like in those reference songs. So get your reference songs, get them ready, get your project ready, and let's dig into this and see what we can make happen. All right, so let's start dissecting the track. And to do this, there are a couple things that I always do every single time. I always look at the loudness, how loud the track is as a whole, and how loud different elements are in the mix. So how loud the lead sound is compared to the kick drum, how loud the clap is compared to the hi-hat. These are all really important things to know, because the loudness or volume level of things is going to make a huge difference in your mix down. Another thing that I look at is how bright a track is. Every element in the song can't be super bright, but the track as a whole needs to sound super bright. And so it's about piecing everything together to make that the end product. Another thing that I look at is fullness. And what I mean by fullness is, does the track have body to it? Does it have beef? Is there something there that really gives the track some oomph and some power? If your track is missing some mids or some lows, it's going to really miss a lot of the body of what makes up a really good mixdown in a song. It's like we've got a box and we're trying to fit a bunch of stuff into it, and if we don't fill it up all the way, you're going to feel like it's missing something and stuff is going to shake around when you move the box. So we want it to be compact and in there, but not trying to blow the box open and make it explode by having too much on the inside. So low end is super important, especially for anyone who's making dance music or stuff that is going to be played by DJs and in clubs, because the low end is what carries the weight of a song. When I listen to the low end, I think, and how deep does it go? How loud is the kick drum? How loud is the bass line? How loud are they compared to each other? Is there enough presence in the low end where it can carry the track without overpowering the track? If you have too much low end, your track is going to sound really muddy and it's going to sound really, really weird. But if you don't have enough, it's going to sound really, really thin, and it also won't have any impact when you play the song out. So we need to make sure that the kick and the bass line are sounding really full and really clean, because that is going to carry your song. Width is something that is a little bit trickier, but is also really important because it can create so much space in cleaning up a mixdown. So when I mean width, we hear sound from right ear all the way around to the left ear. And so if something's really wide, it's coming from out here. If it's really narrow, it's coming from in here. And so some sounds that you are going to have in your mixdown, you're going to want to be right in the middle. Your kick and your bass line should be right in the middle every single time, because those will punch and hit you right in the face, and that's really important. Now, strings or some lead elements and even some backing vocals, really, really wide is really great, and it makes your track sound really enormous and massive, but also creates a lot of space, so anything that's in the middle can really, really stick out. You've got to remember that you've got a lot of space to work with. You don't have to fill up the whole space, but just know that the more space you give each sound, the better it's going to make your mixdown sound, because nothing will be competing with each other. So definitely remember that. And the last element that I look at is depth. And when I'm talking about depth, I focus on relationship of sounds to each other. And part of depth has to do with width as well. So if you make a sound really wide, you can sit it really quietly because it's so wide and nothing is competing with it out here. But if you keep everything here in the middle, it's going to be really hard to create any sort of depth because everything is competing for the same space. So remember, the difference between volume and width is going to help create this depth and perception where you want to give your mix some dynamic. So it's not flat and just smashing you in the face, but it has some room and some character to it. So now it's time to get into the track. You've got your reference songs, you've got an idea of what you want to do, where you want to go with the mix down, and so now it's important to start actually applying all the notes you've taken to your song. So the first thing that I always try and do is I take my kick drum and my sub bass and I play them together. I think, okay, cool, those sound all right. Let's listen to these tracks and see how their kick and bass line are sitting. Okay. Okay, so out of all of these tracks, my track Talking About Love has the loudest bass line. And this is something I purposely do in a lot of my tracks. And this is a tip for you guys, is your kick and your bass line, they are competing a lot for the same space. So if you have a really big kick drum, your sub bass is going to be, it's not going to be very prominent, because if there's too much low end, it ruins your whole track. if you have a really short, punchy kick, you can have a really, really prominent sub bass. One thing that I love in my tracks, and is kind of one of my signature things, is I have a certain kick drum that I've made, and it allows me to really boost the low end of tracks, so my tracks sound really warm in the clubs. And so I noticed that the bass line in my track is louder than the other two references, but the kick drum, especially in the Eagle Eyes remix, is much bigger and louder than mine. So I've got the same kick in this project as the other one, and so I listen to this, and I think I can, compared to the other stuff, I can push the bass line up a little bit more. Okay, so the next thing that I'll do really quickly, an important thing, is the volume level at which you listen when you mix down has a huge impact on how you perceive the sound. If you're listening to stuff super loud, it's going to be so hard to hear the difference between sounds. If you listen quietly, it's going to be really easy to pick out the difference between where your lead is sitting compared to your pads and your percussion, and your hi-hat sits next to your clap. So I really recommend that when you're mixing down a track, it's no longer about listening to it super loud and getting into the emotion of it all. It's about being really technical and really precise. And so keeping it at a volume level where you can hear every element clearly, and it's not going to make your ears too tired. So that's why I have it at this volume level. There will be times where I turn it up to make sure the kick and the bass line are really punching through, but that's only for short periods of time for a very, very specific reason. So let's look at more of the mix down stuff. So I've got my kick and my bass line sitting how I want them to so far. And then I'm going to add in what I call my mid bass. It's the layer I put on top of my sub bass that gives it more body. And it's another sound that I've added that gives it a bit more character. So let's listen to those together. My mid bass is definitely too loud. It's taking over everything, where I have a feeling when I put in the other elements, it's going to be really loud compared to everything and then kind of take over the track. So I'm going to just turn the volume down on this a couple dB and just listen again. Okay, so I'm liking how that's sounding. Now I'm going to add in the piano, which this is a really, it's an important part of the song, is because it carries the chords. The bass line is a nice chord progression, but this is carrying the chords of the track. So I'm going to bring that in, and we're going to listen to that on top of everything else. Okay, so now the piano is, I think the piano can get turned down a little bit as well. And I actually think I could turn the mid bass up just a little bit more now that the piano's back in, because the mid bass adds a lot of character. The other important thing to notice about this so far is the piano by itself, it has some width to it, which is good because the mid bass is much more, the body of it is in the middle. And so if I have the piano a little bit wider, it allows them to sit on top of each other in a way that's really, really, it's just really comfortable, I guess is the way that I would put it. And they complement each other really well to create a really good meat to the track. Put the bass line. So I'm really liking how this is sounding. So the next element that gets added to this is our kind of pluck marimba. So this is 3 different sounds together, and it's kind of pluck blocky sound that I made. This is an actual marimba. And the last section, I think, is a snare drum that I shortened a lot so that I know I changed it to more of like a really shortened tom. First I had a snare in there, it's the tom now. To help just, if you ever have a sound or a lead sound that you feel like is missing some sharpness to really cut through at the beginning, may either take white noise or some sort of percussive sound and make it really short and just so it really snaps right at the beginning. So I'll play all 3 of them together. And then I'll play it without the percussive element, and you'll hear a huge difference at the beginning of the sound. And I'll add it back in. It's just a little trick to help make certain elements pop out. And so I listen to this and I think, okay, the way these 3 elements sit together, it's good, but I feel like the marimba needs to cut through a bit more because the marimbas are beautiful and they're very popular right now. Okay, so I have those 3 layered together, how I'm hearing them in my head. And what's important about this sound is it needs to be bright. And I used this term before, but this needs to be bright because this is the lead that sits on top of everything. And so if it doesn't cut through very well, it'll be really hard to hear this in the mix down, and it'll be very hard to get to sit properly. So what I've done, I've grouped all 3 of them together, and then it's a really simple EQ. I've cut out a lot of the low end, but it's below, I think what I have on here, 182 hertz. I've cut everything out. And then I bumped at 2100, sorry. Like 3.5 dB, just to give it a little bit of brightness so that when it sits on top of everything, there's nothing from the bottom of the mix down or the bottom of those elements that's getting in the way of the rest of the track. So let's listen to everything together now as far as all of the melodic elements. So I brought a little bit more of the blocky pluck sound back in because it helps the sound as a whole really cut through for the lead. Okay, so now we've kind of this is a really good foundation. We've got the kick and the bass line, which are super important, and now we've started to build all the melodic levels on top of it. The next aspect we're going to bring in is we're going to start bringing in some of the percussion. So it's really simple to do, like a hi-hat and a clap. So if I remember how the other reference tracks are, the clap in my song right now is a bit too loud. So I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. I'm going to bring the hi-hat down just a little bit as well. So I'm going to pull up the Eagle Eyes remix and just listen and then I'll listen to the other tracks just to get an idea, to make sure you keep going back to the reference song so you can hear the progress you're making and making sure you're going in the right direction. Okay. Okay.
This isn't just a game. This isn't just a game.
Okay, cool. So I've got a good idea. So I'm gonna throw in all the percussion now and start listening to where things are at. I feel like the levels that I had were pretty good. They're right in that same ballpark. I could adjust a little bit either way to make them a little bit louder, a little bit quieter based on preference. But now I'm gonna put all the percussion in just so we get a good idea of how everything sounds together. So I'm liking how it's sounding. I think the elements they're really close to the other tracks. It's right in the same ballpark. As far as brightness, it's not too sharp, but it's also not too dull where it sounds flat. The one thing that I am noticing is I think there's a little bit of body missing from my track, and it's something I'm going to try and work on in the mix, where I think maybe turning the mid bass up a little bit will add a little more oomph back into the track. One or two elements can change the whole outcome of a mix down. Taking that mid bass and turning it up 3 dB has made the track have much more presence, it sounds a lot more full than it did before. The one thing that I'm missing from this track compared to the other ones is the additionals, like what I call support percussion, the stuff that's not the hi-hat or the clap, is a bit more prominent. All right, so we've got the core of the track where everything that's going on in the song is sitting in the mix down. And so now I need to start bringing the vocals in. The vocals are a huge part of this song. They're going to be the element of the song that people remember and sing along to. So I want to make sure these are sitting right in the mix. So I threw them in and I thought I had them in a place that was, sounding okay in the mix down. So we're going to go down to the breakdown where the vocals come in, and let's listen to where they sit compared to the piano and everything.
Your mind is higher. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right now. Your mind is higher. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right. Your mind is higher. I'm singing out loud. Just getting.
I'm gonna turn them up in the mix a little bit, just to see if it makes a difference as far as I'm cutting through and being really clean.
You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right now. You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started.
So the volume, when I brought the vocals up in the track, I started to notice that the vocals, it's a bit sharp, it's a bit too bright, and it's cutting through at a place that when loud will be really harsh to listen to. So if you really listen carefully, you can hear how, and because this is my friend Michael, he's got an amazing voice and it's very bluesy with a lot of character to it, but my processing sometimes brings out a sharpness to his voice that isn't actually there. And so I have to be really conscious to make sure that anytime I process things in a way where it becomes too sharp, I bring it back down so it's not too bright. So bringing up the volume definitely made that stick out more. So let's listen to how I had it before, just so you can hear the brightness to it.
You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right now. You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right. You're my.
So I've used Mike on multiple tracks. So I have a preset that I use on his voice where it dips down about 6 dBs from 530 or 5300 hertz upwards to 20K. I drop it about 6 dB so it rolls off some of that sharpness and gives his voice a bit more body like it naturally has. So this is what it sounds like that.
You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started.
And this is with it without that.
You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started.
I'm gonna roll it back off.
Right now. You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started.
So all right, let's listen to it again. Now that it's been EQ'd correctly, let's listen back to the volume level in relation to everything else.
You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right now. You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right. You're my desire.
All right, so I'm going to listen to the vocals in the other track so I can get an idea of the level of the relationship of the vocal to the piano, which is in all the tracks, so we can really start to get the depth and the mix down of this section correct. Okay, listen to this one. Okay, and let's listen to this one.
Talking about love. Don't you bring me down, gonna pick me up. This isn't just a game, we're talking about love. Talking about love.
Okay, so what I've noticed from these monitors is the vocals actually sit deeper than I have in my mix down. And so what I've done is I've made the vocals way too loud in the mix. I don't know if way too loud, but they're too loud compared to the reference track. So even though in my head I think it should sound this way, I'm not used to this room. I'm not used to the way that things are set up here. So I have to go back to things that I do know, which is the reference songs. And I'm gonna trust the way that those ones are mixed because they're amazing records. And I'm gonna try and make mine sound just like that. So I'm gonna bring the volume down on the vocal in the mix and see if it starts to sit better compared to the other tracks.
You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right now. You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right. You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right now. You're my desire.
So that to me is starting to sit much better compared to those other reference songs. When I had it before, it was just the vocal was sitting too much on top of everything else, and now it really feels a part of the mix down. So I'm going to go through and make sure I have the EQ on every one of them to be the same. Let me... Okay.
You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right now. You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right now. You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started.
So noticing those strings that I have in there, they're too loud, so I'm going to bring them a little bit more back in the mix.
I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right now. Let's do this right now.
Anytime that I have vocals in a breakdown, they're mixed one way, and anytime there are vocals on top of full-on production, I mix them a different way. One thing I've done is I've changed the EQ, and I need to adjust the EQ back down a little bit because it's a little bit too sharp.
Let's do this right now. Let's do this right. Let's do this right now.
A really important thing, and this is a really simple trick that you may or may not already know, but when you have vocals on top of full production, you're going to want to sidechain them, but just a little bit. So I've got this LFO plugin. I use it all the time for shaping my side chains because they're wonderful for just ducking the vocal a little bit when the kick comes in. And so these are little tips that are going to clean your mix down up so much. So I'm going to turn the LFO off so you can hear it.
Let's do this right now. Let's do this right.
Now I'm going to turn the LFO back on.
Let's do this right now. Let's do this right. Let's do this right now.
So I don't know if you can hear it too much, but a way to tell with the vocal on top of the production is the snap of the kick drum should be cleaner when you sidechain just a little bit of the vocal. And then what you can also do is you can drop the vocal in the mix a little bit more because it's pumping a bit. And so these are little simple tricks that are going to make your mix down sound really clean that take 2 seconds to do. So sidechain vocals just a little bit.
Let's do this right now.
So now I think the lead's a little bit too loud.
Let's do this right now.
So on this build, I'm really gonna listen to how the percussive fill right before the drop is in the mix. If it needs to be louder, if it needs to be wider, or where it's sitting. I really like the volume of that. It's prominent, but it's not too, it needs to be there and have impact, but it's not too in my face. So I'm really liking how this mix down is sounding. Something that's really important to do, and actually I'm going to do this right now, is I'm going to turn the volume up and make sure the kick and the bass line are sounding really clean together. It's important that your kick and your bass line are going to sound really clean together, because if those are, there's such prominent elements in your mix down that if your kick and your bass line are in any way, shape, or form clashing or competing with each other or muddying each other, it's going to mess up your whole mix down. So it's always good to go back and make sure the kick and the bass line are sitting really well together, and then having everything build on top of that. So let's just listen to everything as a whole when it kicks back in again. Actually, I think after listening to everything, I think the kick can go up a little bit in the mix down. So we'll turn it up a few dBs, just so it's really important the kick is there. I'm really liking how this is sounding. So let's go back and let's listen to the reference songs again, just to make sure we're still in the right direction and right ballpark.
This isn't just a game.
I'm going to turn the piano up on mine. So since I turned the volume up on the piano just a little bit, I need to make sure I make the adjustments back to the vocals, because that was a key relationship between the vocals sitting on top of the piano. So I moved the piano up like half a dB. So let's just make sure I bump up all the vocals about half of a dB. So it keeps the same relationship.
You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right now. You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right now. You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just let's do this right now. Let's do this right now.
So I really like how this sounds. And so what I would do is, the next step in my process is I would take this, I would save it, I would bounce it first, save it, and I'd go step away from the computer for an hour, 2 hours, maybe until tomorrow. It's important to come back with fresh ears, because sometimes what happens is you get so stuck in on a mix down, you're hearing things in your head that aren't actually the way they sound, and so it's really good to get a fresh start. So what I would do is, I feel like I've made some really good progress in the mix down. I would bounce it, I would save the file, I would close it, I'd go get a workout in, go hang out with friends, maybe go take a nap or just go to bed if it's nighttime, and then listen back with fresh ears tomorrow and keep going back and forth. Reference your tracks that you've picked that you want it to sound like. Make sure it's sounding bright but also full. Make sure nothing's clashing, and keep at it. Be really, really precise. Be really, really particular, because the better your tracks sound, the better success you're going to have as a producer. All right, guys, so the last thing we're going to do is we're going to listen and compare how the track was mixed before and after I did the mix down session today. So I've got both songs in here. I've got one that's the original mix and then one that's the mix that I did today. So let's listen to the original first, and then I'll bounce to the mixed one. The one in yellow is the one that's going to be being played. So let's check this out.
You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right now. You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's
You can
do
hear
this
the huge difference in the vocal level right there, and the way that the vocal sits in the mix down. I think it's much cleaner in the new version that we have.
right now. You're my desire. I'm singing out loud. Just getting started. Let's do this right now. Let's do this right now.
I think the mid bass is sitting a bit better.
Let's do this right now.
The vocal is sitting better in the mix as well. The lead sounds really good on this one. Let's bounce to the other one. Here, the lead in this one is just way too quiet. The strings are a bit more sunk in on this mix, but I think it fits with what we're trying to do. So hopefully that, this process has really helped you guys learn some tips and tricks and start to train your ear on what to be looking for. Because when I first started out mixing down my own tracks, I had a really hard time because I had no idea what I was trying to do. So hopefully these are some skills that I've learned over the years that can be used for you guys in your mix down process. So you have a really good idea of what to be looking for and can start to speed up the process of taking a mix down from its original state to helping it become more professional to a point where you might be able to start releasing some music, which would be wonderful for you guys. So hope you guys have enjoyed it. Hit me up with any questions and I'll continue to be a resource for you guys. Thanks for tuning into the class and good luck with everything.